people get excited about low carb, and then they learn about fasting and intermittent fasting, and then it's like they think it's this package that they have to have, and you don't have to do both at all times. Maybe at times it does make sense to do both. For me, if you're building muscle, not only should you not fast, you should probably eat 3 to 4 meals a day.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and today I have with me a very special guest. I have Danny Vega, and I'm so excited to be able to ask you some of these important questions that get asked a lot in the carnivore space. And those of us that are carnivores or very low carb, we hear the same questions from people and the same put downs and harassment basically from people all the time about the carnivore diet. So I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us and taking the time today.
It's my pleasure. We talked about this before. I talk about this all the time with people. I don't find myself, to be like proselytizing, but people see me. Like this morning, I got 3 breakfasts. Of course, they came with all the carbs, but I had 3 breakfasts because I had like a big old omelet and I had like 2 orders of extra fried eggs. And people will ask, and like the thing about it with me is like, don't you want to look the same all the time? Don't you want to feel the same all the time? And that I'll get into that later, because like I've had like some career changes with my business, and stepping away a little bit, for the most part, stepping away from my business and going back into the corporate world. And I just find that it continues to be the best way. Like I actually am more carnivore now than I was the last couple of years, like being in a, basically a keto business, So yeah, I'll never get sick of talking about this. I'll never get sick about spreading this stuff, because like you said, you needed help. And I know that there's a lot of people out there still that, us who've been in it in a while, we take it for granted, but some people, a lot of people are still, just understanding that high cholesterol is bad, or like fat is bad, or saturated fat is bad. So I think it's like a labor of love that will never stop for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and I think we have to keep talking about it, because what is that saying? Like, people have to hear things like 15 times or something in order to believe it. And so I think we all just have to keep talking about it over and over again. And it feels redundant to us sometimes, but I just feel like it's such an important message to get out there. So let's start with your story and how you became kind of a low carb eater and then a low carb advocate, and just how you became to be this person that you are.
So yeah, I grew up and I was always obsessed with like performance, and I played football and I ran track in high school, and but even as early as grade school, I was in after school care every day. Both my parents worked really hard, and the guy who took care of me for a while, like in the school where I was at, was a bodybuilder. And all the other kids were out playing, and I was out with him trying to do pull-ups on the in the playground, and he would show me like his magazines. I would be like, oh man, I want to have big muscles like that. And that was just when I was really young. But then I started playing football when I was 9, and obviously in like middle school and high school, I realized the first thing was like how important it is to lift weights and to do that side of it. That's going to help your performance. But even I was very lucky from a diet standpoint. I had a guy as a coach as early as 7th grade who was an ex-Marine. Well, you're never an ex-Marine. He was a Marine. And he gave me a diet to do. And that was my first time doing a diet. And it was actually not anything as far as dieting, because I wasn't dieting. It was just basically how to eat, to get bigger. And it wasn't, I would still think to this day that this would be okay. I would stay away from some of the stuff, but it was like protein for breakfast, eggs and oatmeal and all that stuff. But just like focusing on protein, focusing on obviously animal protein. And then in high school, it was even more important. And then in college, I played college football, and I was, the teacher's pet. I always tell people I was the teacher's pet in the weight room. I just, loved my strength and conditioning coach, and he left me after my sophomore year to go to UNC to coach the strength coach for the UNC basketball. And then he went to the Timberwolves for several years. And, I graduated from Columbia. I went to University of Florida to get my master's, and I wanted to do strength and conditioning. So I found this amazing grad program that was very unique. And then I got a little bit more into diet. And back then, a company that still exists to this day, and it's funny because I don't really agree with them on a lot of stuff anymore, but like at least back then they were conscious about carbs, and that was Precision Nutrition. Dr. John Berardi, very smart guy, very smart group. They got a great certification program, and they also help people with their business side of things, personal trainers. And so I was eating like pretty low carb diet even back in 2005, 2006, actually, yeah, 2006. And, time went on. And then, 2011, I actually was in CrossFit. I got into CrossFit. My first was born, and I had taken a few years where I was just kind of doing my own thing, like basically no rhyme or reason to what I was doing, but I was staying in shape. And, CrossFit got me back obviously into the joy of lifting, but it also got me into like the diet side of things, because back then it was like paleo and CrossFit were like together no matter what. So that got me to think about the quality of the food I eat, not exactly, the composition as far as like the macro ratios, but, I learned about, the importance of properly sourced food and things like that. I did notice even back then, before like I found the ketogenic diet and then the carnivore diet, that, it was interesting to me because I would work really hard. And obviously, being competitive, being an athlete my whole life, I was always like going to the next level. And I would notice that my appetite would go up, and then I would eat things that were considered paleo. But then even back then, I was like, nowhere in nature can someone just buy a bottle of agave, or nowhere in nature can someone just buy like a whole bottle of nuts, like where most nuts you can like, you're gonna have to like work hard to crack them open. And I would just, when I would feel myself feeling like inflamed or even like pudgy a little bit, not pudgy, but just put on a little bit of weight, I would cut back on those things and I would feel better. And so fast forward to 2016, I had started powerlifting in 2013, and I had gotten really good. Like I got to the, top 25 in the country in my weight class. And what happened when I left CrossFit was that I entered into this world where everything was all about carbs and eating as much as possible and eating as many carbs. Like I would go to a powerlifting meet, and there will be guys with boxes of cereal, like eating cereal, and, and I did that. And I attribute probably what got me out of powerlifting, probably due to my diet, because I took my eye off that and I started to eat more carbs, and I actually tore my meniscus. And that's what caused me to step away temporarily at the time from powerlifting, because I just was like, you know what, I'm 240 pounds and I'm starting to snore. I'm starting to have labored breathing, things like that, where I never did before. And I don't feel good. Like, I lived in a house with 2 floors. I would walk up and down the stairs, and, waking up in the morning was kind of like, took like an hour to get going with, all the aches and pains. And anybody who's watching this or listening to this right now who's thinking that this is part of getting old, it's not. I would even argue honestly that something like menopause, even that, I would argue that could possibly be not quite anymore, because I think genetically we've just gotten so bad that, we have permanent marks, so many permanent marks on our genes that it would be very, very rare to see a woman going through menopause like at 70. But I totally subscribe to the idea that humans were just better back in the day. They were smarter. This whole idea that we're smarter now. They were smarter, they were better, they were more robust, they were more resilient, they just all around. And a lot of that is due to our diet. And it's interesting because throughout history, we've had times where, if you look at like right around the time of the Industrial Revolution, people were really small, and you can attribute that, of course, to like, the factories and all of that and the chemicals and all that. But just in general, anywhere where you could see like year-round farming, and where people are eating just massive amounts of grains and sugar. People are shorter, have more issues. And so anyways, I just basically, like 2016, I went on a diet after I tore my meniscus, just because I was like, you know what, back then I was like, well, I'm heavy, if I lose 20 pounds, I'll feel better. And I went on a bodybuilding diet, like, because my buddy was a bodybuilder, and he set me up, and I felt at the very end, at 4 months, I was just shredded, super lean, and super miserable. I would literally pig out the whole weekend. I was supposed to have a cheat day, which would turn into a cheat weekend, and like the climax of that was Memorial Day 2016, when I had a 3-day food binge, and it was 10 o'clock on Memorial Day. And I knew that the next day I was going to have to bring my fat back down to 50 grams a day, which for me is like, I mean, think about it, that's 400 and what is that? 400 calories of fat. Like I eat that in easily, probably sometimes in a meal, and sometimes more. Like if with a ribeye, a pound of ribeye is 50. Actually, a pound of ribeye is probably like 100 grams of fat. So double that, in one meal. So at this time, I was training at a gym here in Tampa, and my buddy Trevor was actually in grad school at University of Tampa, and he had done a little bit of work with Ryan Lowry and with Jacob Wilson, and he kept, like, we met at the gym, we were acquaintances, and he kept coming up to me. He said, "You got to try this keto diet." And I was like, "Keto? What's keto?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, you just don't eat carbs, and you just eat lots of protein and fat." I'm like, "That's ridiculous. Like, how am I ever going to have energy?" And he would be like, you just like kind of nudge me and be like, "Look, check this out. Look at these keto pancakes. Oh, that looks good." And then finally, like at the end of that cut, I was actually really lean, but I was like, you know what? My quality of life sucked. And I looked older. When I look back, I looked older, which is crazy. And I said, what's the worst that can happen? I'm already lean. I'm on my work, already where I'm at. And so I decided to do this keto diet. I basically, first thing I did, obviously, was research as much as possible, which back then was research papers, because you had like a site or two here and there. In 2016 was when this happened. And you don't have what you have now. And I just was like, this is really interesting. So and then I said, "Send me everything you have." And he sent me 41 published papers. And then I read all.
Wow.
And then, like, I read The Art and Science of Low Carb Performance. And then I read Keto Clarity and Cholesterol Clarity. Those were like 3 of the first books that I read. And I started the diet, and 2 or 3 days into it, I remember waking up and walking down the stairs and being like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like a ballerina." Like, oh my gosh, like I feel so light. I feel like my joints, I played on AstroTurf, like the worst type of turf in college. It was just like a little layer of like fake, turf. And I was beat up. And like, then I would have all this energy, and I would park on the opposite side of the parking lot, because I'm like, I'm just going to walk, and this feels so good. And then I even decided to do a half marathon, and I was like, what the heck? I'm 220 pounds doing a half marathon. And actually, I increased my productivity at work. I always tell people, I'm a very hard worker. I would put a good solid 10 to 15% increase in productivity just from what I ate. And that year I won President's Club I was a medical device rep at the time, and I won President's Club. And, it was not an easy win, because there was like a layoff in the middle of the year, but it was like that 3 o'clock call when you're 2 hours away from home. And do I make that call or do I not make that call? I would make that call every day. And that makes a difference over time. And so, like, 2 months after I started, I was like listening to podcasts. And at the time, the only thing that there was I forgot, it was two of them. And then it was Keto Evangelist. And that was Brian, my buddy Brian. And I just reached out to Brian, and just out of nowhere, I just like, "Hey man," I just emailed him, and I was like, "Look, I'm an ex-athlete. This is, my background. If you ever want to like do an episode on athletes, like, I'd love to join." And so he's like, funny you mentioned that. I'm starting a ketogenic athlete podcast. And so I was the second person he ever interviewed, and we hit it off. And then after the podcast, we talked for an hour, and he's like, you got to be my co-host. And I was like, let me talk to my wife. And then I became his co-host, and then the keto athlete podcast started. And a year later, that was in June of 2016. In August of 2016, Brian had Amber O'Hearn on his podcast, and she blew my mind. I was just like, you mean I don't have to eat vegetables? Like I was just trying to cover my nutritional bases. You know, I was trying to be well-rounded. And August of 2017, which, you know, very, and then we had Dr. Baker on like in September. Nobody knew who he was. Somebody was like, there's this guy, he's a doctor. I see you're doing carnivore. This guy, he's a rower and he's a doctor. And that's when I met Dr. Baker. That's why Dr. Baker and I are so close, because like we've known each other for so long. But yeah, I started the carnivore diet, and it started off as a month of just salmon and anything that comes from a cow. As amazing as I felt on keto, I tell people like the difference between the standard diet and keto, and the difference between keto and carnivore, it's greater between keto and carnivore for me. And you know, I started to I broke some state records in the rowing in Florida, and indoor rowing. And you know, basically since 2017, for the most part, like there's been periods, and I've always been honest with people, like I didn't like being pegged as a carnivore, because every time I brought in like an avocado, people would be like, I thought you were carnivore. And I'm like, well, I'm an avocarnivore, you know, like I would just tell people, you know, like, and so, you know, throughout the years I've done things, and I've learned things, and there are times where like maybe, you know, vegetables or whatever, certain foods can be used medicinally. There's times like during the summer for me where it's smarter, my output, to have some carbs, like some starchy carbs, like sweet potato and fruits and things like that. But like overall, for the general person, especially for a person in my position where I am now in the tech world, I'm in sales, and I basically want to be as productive as possible all day. I am a breakfast, lunch, and dinner guy. I know a lot of people love fasting. I personally think that with the amount of stress that we are carrying on, unless you have serious issues with insulin resistance and you really need to like move forward, I think it's important to have breakfast, and not just breakfast whenever you want it, breakfast in the morning. And if you want, we can get into that later. But I'll have like a typical day. Like this morning, like I said, I had like 7 eggs and some meat with that. And then I had for lunch, well, actually for lunch, I had a work lunch. So I actually had a poke bowl with salmon. And for dinner, I'm starting with 10 wings, and then I'm cooking burgers for me and the boys. But it's just, I know I've been droning on for a long time, but I love this way of eating. And, you know, I think it's the best way for someone who's traveling a lot, or who works a lot and needs that productivity and can't afford 3 hours of sluggishness, or to have to like be like just chugging on the caffeine and the stimulants, or like keeping the sugar in their system because they got this blood sugar roller coaster. So that's my long soliloquy about all of my background. And yeah, let's continue, because I feel like I've been talking forever.
Yeah. No, I love it. It was a great introduction. So great that you wiped out all my questions. No.
Oh no.
No, just kidding. Several of them though. So I do want to talk just for a minute about fasting though. Like, what do you think about? I get that you don't fast. And I actually don't really like to fast, because in the beginning I did lots and lots of fasting and I wasn't eating enough and I was gaining weight. And that was a really hard place to be. And I came from under eating. So I didn't know that I was hungry. I didn't know that what I was eating, you know, wasn't enough, because my hunger cues were all messed up. And so that's hard for me. And it's funny that we're talking about this today, because I'm actually fasting today. And it has been a hard day for me. Like, I got up this morning and like my hands were shaking a little bit just thinking about not eating all day. Like it, you know, I'm like white knuckling it through the day, because I don't like to be hungry, and I don't feel like I should have to be hungry, but I do want the benefits of fasting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Truth be told, I've gained like 6 or 7 pounds maybe 5 pounds probably at this point, since I hit my goal in November. And I think it's just being more lenient with cheese and stuff like that. You know, if you're not in weight loss mode anymore, it's easy to put on a few pounds. I've also been doing a lot of exercising. I just finished 75 hard, and I moved on to the Live Hard program. And yeah, I did Michael Mason's 100 burpee challenge, and then moved on to 100 push-ups a day every day for the month of May and June. And so like I'm doing a lot of exercising. So I've gained some weight. Is it muscle? I don't know. So hopefully some of it is. But in any case, I wanted to talk about fasting and how you feel about fasting and how that affects like muscle building and things like that. Like, would you ever fast on a weightlifting day, or would you not fast that day? Like, how would you work that out for somebody?
This is great. I love this question because I do love fasting and I do think it's important. And I also think that we need to be honest with ourselves. And I'm talking mostly to women right now because women who chronically undereat, first of all, you know, trying to frame it a different way. I actually, what's Gabrielle's last name? The doctor, she's amazing. We met in person at KetoCon last year and we became friends, and she's amazing. She's really big on protein, animal protein, getting your protein in. And she did a presentation on, are you over fat or under muscled? And, you know, there's a lot of people that are, even though like the BMI, I would say that the BMI is only good for obesity. You know, the BMI starts to get completely irrelevant with someone like me because I'm supposed to weigh 45 pounds less and I carry like 10 to 15% body fat at all time. That's just like, I'm vain, so I'm never gonna let myself, it's just like, but I love to eat, and like, but the thing is I'll eat lots. But you know, with fasting, first of all, people get excited about low carb and then they learn about fasting and intermittent fasting, and then it's like they think it's this package that they have to have, you know, and you don't have to do both at all times. Maybe at times it does make sense to do both. For me, if you're building muscle, not only should you not fast, you should probably eat 3 to 4 meals a day, because you're gonna have, basically you're giving yourself more like leucine signals, where like a typical 30 grams of protein is going to give you that leucine signal, which is going to trigger your body to like be anabolic, you know? And so, you know, if you're only doing that twice a day, even if you're hitting your protein goal, you're going to absorb the protein, but you're only going to take advantage of that. And you don't have insulin, which, you know, as much as we hate insulin, it is very anabolic. It's not selectively anabolic. It's anabolic in fat tissues. It's anabolic in muscle tissue. But at the same time, like someone who's trying to put on muscle, I think social media has made it to where if you look at pictures of me in college, I ate so much. Like I literally, my sophomore year, put blue cheese on everything. Like I would have blue cheese on burgers, blue cheese on hot dogs. I would just load up the calories. And, you know, we don't have that anymore, where people like are comfortable putting on a little bit of fat when they're trying to put on muscle because of Instagram and all that stuff, because everybody wants to be close to beach ready all the time. And so what ends up happening, people like chronically undereat and they want to be big and ripped at the same time. And it just doesn't work that way. You know, like you can definitely build muscle and burn fat, especially if you are just coming off the couch. You're going to be building a lot of muscle and burning a lot of fat. As you get older, and especially if you're being consistent in the gym, your comfortable number has to change too. You can't say like, oh, I looked so good when I was at 145 and, you know, now I'm 155. But yeah, what's your muscle? Like, what's your lean body mass? You know, look at that, you know, because if you're chronically under eating, you are chronically undernourished. And if you're chronically undernourished, you're not getting the vitamins and the minerals that your neurotransmitters need to make you feel good, to all the things that will keep your body not stressed and in a parasympathetic state where you're just burning fat. So what ends up happening, and I learned this last year with leptin, like I had just gone through like a huge, like starting in August all the way through December. I think one of the books that I read is here. It's, Mastering Leptin. This is an amazing book for anybody. This is very well digestible. And it's written by Byron J. Richards. And it's if you are kind of aware of like low carb and keto, you'll really love this because, you know, this person, he talks about a lot of the stuff that happens is because of leptin resistance, you know, like, and you get really insulin resistant with leptin resistance. And so why is it important to me, number one, not to fast all the time? Because if we know, especially nowadays, especially post 2020, where people are just overly a lot more stressed, and we're a lot more connected to things that are, you know, very stressful, even if it's at a low level. Just looking at screens, all of those things are very stressful. It's low level, but it's enough to where it's gonna mess with our testosterone. It's gonna mess with our just our ability to like be in that parasympathetic flow state, you know. Leptin is at its lowest in the morning. And leptin is a satiety hormone that's made by by fat cells, and it's supposed to be highest in the evening, and cortisol peaks in the morning. And so what a lot of people are doing, where they're just having coffee and fat, which, by the way, in my opinion, if you're just like fasting to burn fat, coffee with fat is not going to break your fast, because there are studies going all the way back to 1982 showing that even 53 grams of fat will not trigger an insulin response. If it's dairy, maybe, because there is a little bit more of a risk with dairy fat, like triggering an insulin response. But if you're having, you know, like ghee or even butter with coffee, and you're having that in the morning, you're not going to raise insulin, but your cortisol is highest in the morning, your leptin's lowest in the morning. Anything you eat, even if it's just protein and fat, is going to trigger a little bit of an insulin response to shuttle the nutrients into your cells. Guess what? Insulin and cortisol have an inverse relationship. So if you get an insulin spike, it brings down your cortisol. So now you're bringing your leptin where it needs to be. You're keeping your cortisol from going too high, and then your leptin is going to peak in the evening when it's supposed to, assuming that you're eating enough calories and you're not already leptin resistant, with which if you've dieted more than a few times and you've gained weight back, and now you feel like you can't maintain your body weight unless you're eating 13, 14, 1500 calories a day, you are leptin resistant. You know, if you have to go down to 1200 calories to diet, that even that will stop working sometimes. So fasting always every day, I don't think it's great. Now, here's the thing, like if you're trying to build muscle, I go by this. So like if I'm trying to burn fat and I'm in a caloric deficit, I will incorporate refeed days. They're not pig out days. They're just, I'm adding about 25 to 30% more calories that day, because it's very important for leptin and it's important for my metabolism. If I'm bulking, I'm going to do, you know, maybe like as I'm getting to that highest part of the bulk and I'm getting further along, I'll incorporate a fast day, or on the week where I'm just like, but it's on an off day. So athletes, you know, people who are active, I would say the best day if you want to do a fast would be on a low intensity cardio day, which we shouldn't be doing more than 2 or 3 high intensity cardio type days, because again, very stressful. And if you don't eat carbs, you don't have that built-in little band-aid that you can give someone from a really high cortisol spike from a workout, and then they have an insulin spike. So you got to manage that. Now, and you know, a fast every quarter. Like I've done multiple 3-day fasts, 4-day fasts. I haven't gone higher than that, but that's my thoughts on fast. I just feel like I'm not hating on fast at all. I just think a lot of people, we're getting into that same category of like people chronically pulling the calorie lever and lowering the calories too much. They're chronically pulling the fast lever a little too much. And now, you know, your allostatic load, which is just like the amount of stress that you can take, that stress bucket is overflowing. And if that stress bucket is overflowing, you're not in a calm state, and you're not going to in a parasympathetic state, and you're not burning fat. So that's my long-winded answer on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. And I am a perfect example of that happening, fasting too much, not eating enough. I was eating like 2 hamburger patties every other day with some cheese or butter on them. And that was it, like for weeks. Gained 18 pounds in 8 months like that. So for people watching that are not having good luck with carnivore or very low carb or keto or something like that, keep in mind that you have an advantage. Doing low carb, you automatically get more calories. And if you don't give your body those calories, your metabolism will slow down. It took me 4 months to fix my metabolism before I was able to lower my calories a little bit. So I lost 35 pounds at about 2,000 calories a day, which most women would say is ridiculous and impossible, and they could never do that. But I'm telling you, it happened. And I mean, I wasn't extreme exercising either. I didn't start like really getting back into weightlifting until just a few months ago, probably. I mean, I was doing it sporadically here and there, but so your answer tells me that I fasted on the wrong day because today was a weight day for me. So I should have waited and fasted tomorrow on a sprinting day instead. That would have been better.
You know what though? Honestly, like I would say, how many sprints do you do like on a sprinting day?
So when we go early in the morning, and my husband's faster than me. So he just runs. So he goes, and I walk for a mile, and then I turn around, and on the way back to the car, I sprint in 20-second increments, 20-second sprint, 40-second walk, 20-second sprint for a mile.
Okay. I mean, honestly, you know, as you're fat adapted, there's a study, the faster study, everybody knows about that. Like, well, a lot of people know it's 2017, basically looking at endurance athletes and how intense their exercise had to get before more than 50% of the energy that they were drawing was coming from sugar, which is like that, you know, from glycogen, from, you know, gluconeogenesis eventually. And as you get fat adapted, you are able to operate at a higher intensity using fat as fuel. The problem is that if you're continuously doing for long enough, you're going to get to a point where the way your body creates sugar with fat is not keeping up with that energy demand. And then you run the risk of like burning muscle and bone and hair and like all of that stuff that it's going to draw from. And like, you know, for me, I think even my views on HIIT have changed. I think like HIIT for me, especially as a longtime low carb athlete, is I will go hard, but then I'll rest like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I will go hard. And actually, there's actually research, interestingly, that show, I mean, nobody wants to hear this one, you know, it's like one sprint is just as good as 4 or 5, which I was like, wow, I saw that and I was just like, that's intense, that's amazing. And it's like, I know people, I have friends who've written books and they're popular and they're older than me and they do it like that. And I'm like, wow, you know, it's like less is more, especially in 2023. But I just say like, don't overdo the fasting, you know, and just don't force a fast. You know, like if you get to that point where you're just like, you're really uncomfortable, you're really crabby, you know, now's not the time. That like, if you do it at the right time, it's magical, you know, like it really is. It's like, you know, you just feel so good. You get over that first 24 hours, maybe that like, you know, little times here and there where you're hungry or whatever. And then you just throw back some salt and you're just like, oh, better again. That's all it was. It's just like low electrolytes, you know? So yeah, that's
Yeah. And I've been using electrolytes, and like I said, I don't fast often. I used to fast a lot. But to me, it kind of brings back that old cycle of binging, like binging and restricting, you know, it kind of reminds me of that. So I do have to be a little bit careful. And the 24-hour mark is where things got easier today for sure. This morning I was white knuckling it, but by this afternoon, you know, I was feeling a little bit better. I'm definitely going to eat tomorrow. I am not, and I've done 3 days like you. I've done 5 days, but yeah, that's not what this is about. I was just like trying to see if I could do it. You know, it's just kind of a little challenge. I was doing it with a friend, but I'm definitely having some ribeye tomorrow. Dehydrated ribeye, definitely. So let me ask you about biohacking. What are your thoughts on biohacking, and do you currently do any biohacking?
Oh man, I am a big time biohacker, and let's see, I don't even know where to start. I would tell you right now that in 2020, as insane as I went, being someone how I am, like who's just like consuming information and getting obsessive over things when I see things that are very wrong, and I'm just learning, and I slept that year from like March on, I probably was averaging like 5 hours of sleep a night. And one thing that actually really helped me was my daily, like part of my morning routine every morning was always to like go in my home sauna and spend like 20 minutes in the morning. But I had a Juve light. Now I still have my little Juve, but I have also it's red light rising. It's my buddy's company. It's like a big full stack of red light and infrared. And I would actually put the infrared shining on my brain, like it would go right on the top of my skull. And I got that idea from my friend Anthony, Anthony J. He's an epigeneticist. He's brilliant. He wrote a book called Estrogeneration that everybody should read. It's about all the xenoestrogens in certain foods and plastics and personal care products and cleaning products. And he told me like to do that like right up, because the infrared will go through several layers of like skin and bone and all that. And that's literally just powering your cells, just powering your mitochondria. So I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of certain things like wearables, you know, things like Oura Ring, getting like the data from that. I would just say, you know, for any type of biohacking modality or anything, I would say, you know, don't let the success of your day be dictated by numbers on a screen or a printout or a keto, like what are your ketones and what are your blood, you know, go by how you feel. You know, one thing I love about Dr. Baker is that he's just like, you know, people are talking about like they walk into an office, they get like their blood work, and everything that society cares about is within range. And then the doctor pats them on the back and they leave, and they don't think to say, but doctor, I feel like crap. You know, like what's going on? Like, why do I feel so crappy if my numbers are in range?
It's like you said before about you would wake up in the morning, because I was going to say that too. Like I would wake up in the morning, I would sit on the end of my bed. It would take me like a minute before I could get out of bed, right? People, like you said, people just associate that with getting older. So people don't think to say to their doctor, because all their friends feel like that too. So they don't think to say to their doctor, but I just don't feel right, or I don't feel like I used to, because they think they're not supposed to feel like they used to because they're getting older.
Yeah, and then the doctor will just like dismiss it. I mean, I'm not gonna like poo-poo on doctors because I have a lot of friends, know a lot of people who are doctors who have done the work, but you can only know that if you do the work and you do the research. You're not gonna just know that because you're a doctor or a nurse. Now, a lot of people that just, oh, I'm a nurse, yeah, okay, but what do you know about keeping people healthy? You know about keeping people alive. You know about managing symptoms. You know about, you know, all the important interventions for like disasters and like, you know, things that are important. But how do we optimize health? And like Dr. Baker's like keeps it simple. It's like, what's your waist to hip ratio? Can you still jump? Can you still sprint? Can you still run? You should be able to, right? Things, all of these things, high blood pressure, all of these things can be lowered by lowering carbs, you know. And you know, eating a carnivore diet just takes it to the next level, because number one, you're the ultimate low carb, you know, because there is no carbs, you know, maybe if you're eating liver, eggs, things, incidental carbs, but you also eliminating possible plant toxins. And I don't, not the one who's going to tell everybody don't eat them, because I eat these things and I feel fine. I know there's certain things that are trigger foods that cause me to eat more of them. And just so happens that some of those trigger foods also cause massive amounts of inflammation, like, you know, peanuts and peanut butter. Like I love that stuff, but it's, you know, I'm swollen and, you know, so anyways, like, yeah, I mean, honestly, like as you age, you got to be even more diligent, and you gotta accept that, you know, and I've had to accept that. I used to be like, okay, change my diet around a little bit, you know, this gets better, or like work out a little bit more, this gets better. Now it's like change diet, work out, do this or that biohacking thing, you know, and I'll continue to do that, because like I just want to be like Dave Asprey said, like he's like, oh, he wants to live until he's 130, but like what is it, what good is it if you're 130, 150 and you're just like, you're not able to move around? Like I'd rather just, you know, call it a day, you know. But you know, if you want a health span, let's talk about health span. And yeah, so all types of biohacking things that, I mean, like there's all types of stuff that I think is important. I just think, you know, it shouldn't be, it's definitely not going to work if you don't have the fundamentals in place. It will work really well if you do have the fundamentals in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does a typical day of eating look like for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, yesterday I woke up and I had like a pound of ribeye or chuck eye. I had a pound of chuck eye. I am blessed by my current company because we get $20 of DoorDash every day. And I just so happen to have a place downstairs from my building so I can save money and get more meat by picking it up. So I walk there, a place called Naked Farmer, and lunch will either be about like 12 ounces. It's not a lot for me, but like it's free. So 12 ounces. So it'll either be like 8 ounces of steak and 4 ounces of salmon. If I'm in a salmon mood, sometimes I'll get all salmon. Or it's usually like 12 ounces of steak. And then dinner is like usually like, anywhere from like, a pound to 20 ounces of ground beef. I can honestly eat ground beef every single day. I will never get sick of it. I had yesterday, I made us burgers, me and the boys, and I grilled it actually, which it came out even better. I'm a big fan of dairy. I personally love it. I've noticed that maybe I lean out a little bit more when I cut it out, but for me, it's like, it's that good. And it's, I'm having, like we talked about before tonight, I'm having some leftover wings, and then I'm going to not grill them because I don't want to like take the time. I'm probably going to throw some butter on the skillet and cook some more burgers. But that's pretty much a day. Like I do every now and then have carbs, but it's always strategic. And it's always, I used to like, I had a period there where I was experimenting and I was like, what does a carb up do? And I did like a whole month or a whole summer once, like of doing carb ups every week. And now I feel like I just let it happen, like when I feel like I'm a little bit too stressed, that's a little band-aid for me. Throw in some carbs, like, and it's usually like rice or sweet potato. That's it. I don't ever eat bread. I'm not a big fan of bread. I do have like a homemade like sourdough challah bread that's fermented, and that gluten, that gluten is most of it is removed. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of bread. I'm not gonna say I'm not a huge fan of corn because I do have corn tortillas like sometimes, but in general I stay away from wheat. And but like most of my, if I were to eat carbs, it would be like starchy carbs like sweet potato and boniato, which is like taro, I think. No, I don't know what they call it it's just like sweet potato variations, tubers, things like that. I don't really eat that much fruit. And that's about it. But like on a daily basis for high productivity, nothing better than carnivore. Just 3 meals a day, carb.
Yeah, you don't have that afternoon dip. And I always tell people, if you're wondering if you can add carbs back in, just try it. I tried white rice about 6 months ago. It did not go well. I love jasmine rice. It's like one of my favorite things in the world with some butter on it. And I went ahead and made some jasmine rice for the family, and I had some, and it led to like 6 bowls of jasmine rice. And I was like, this is definitely a problem. I have got to quit doing this. That did not work out very well for me because it just showed that my old tendencies with the carbohydrates are still there. So, that's something I don't really want to mess with. So now one last question. What is one piece of advice you would give to somebody who is thinking about trying carnivore or very low carb?
I said this before, I'll say it again. Eat. Don't do that and restrict. Eat, learn about what you need to do, like learn about what keto is if you want to do keto. Carnivore is even easier, and make sure that you eat a lot. I guarantee you have on average, if you have insulin resistance, you're going to enjoy an extra like 300 and something calories a day of burn, because the more insulin resistance you have, the more calories that you will burn from lowering the carbs. But yeah, definitely eat. Don't like go into like diet mode. Especially don't eat the same amount of calories you used to eat like on a diet, on a regular diet, because that will just be disastrous. You'll feel terrible. So that's
been there, done that.
Yeah.
Don't follow in my footsteps. Okay,
Yep.
thank you so much for joining me, Danny. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time here on the Carnivore Revolution.